is Parastu Imami, and I'm the host of The Road to Success for Your Highly Sensitive Child. This podcast is about empowering parents of highly sensitive children to nurture their child's unique personality trait and create a path to success. Our podcast provides guidance, insights, and support to help you unlock your child's full potential, fostering resilience, confidence, and a bright future. If you're new to my podcast, please go back and listen to episodes 1 and 2 because they provide information on high sensitivity that all subsequent episodes will build upon. If you skip these episodes, you won't get as much out of this and all subsequent episodes. To book a private coaching session with me, please visit my website at parentinghsc.com. Today, I'm honored to welcome Mr. Terrance Lee as my guest. Terrance has embraced the positive and empowering aspects of being a highly sensitive person, has unleashed his superpowers, and has built a highly successful career. He's the author and publisher of 2 books. His first book, Quiet Voice, Fearless Leader, was written to challenge the misperception held by many that introverts cannot lead. And his second book, The Calm Effect, 5 keys for introverts to succeed without stress and lead with poise, was recently published. Congratulations, Terrance, on those 2 books. Terrance is also a producer, a coach, and a speaker. Welcome, Terrance. It's a pleasure to have you with me today.
Thank you so much. It is absolutely a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. As you know, I'm creating a global movement in bringing awareness and acceptance of highly sensitive people, and I'm committed to transforming how the world sees highly sensitive people, and more importantly, how highly sensitive people see themselves. The reason I decided to do this podcast series on careers and bring in guests such as yourself, who are highly sensitive and who have built an amazing career for themselves, is because many, if not all of my clients have this fear that their highly sensitive child may not do well in the workforce, given that they have deep emotions and given that they have a finely tuned nervous system. And so I thought about how I could address this because it's coming up more and more. And I thought, why don't I do a series? And I will bring both men and women who have done really well for themselves to kind of give us their perspective on how they became so successful in their field. And so I want to thank you again for being my guest and helping me debunk this myth that highly sensitive people are fragile. You know, they're too emotional, and because they're so emotional that they can't be successful in their careers. So let's just dive into it. Let's start with my first question, which is a question that I ask almost every guest on my podcast, which is, would you please tell us about, your journey as a highly sensitive person?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my journey, I would say, goes back to when I was a kid. I moved around a lot. My dad took a lot of different jobs as an accountant, and so we would move to different cities. And early on, mostly in elementary school, I was actually a pretty outgoing kid, I would say, mainly because I was trying to make friends and trying to form relationships with these new schools. And a lot of that changed when I got to middle school. When I got to 7th grade, I was 13 years old and I was in a choir. And while I was in that choir, there's a situation that happened with the choir director that really changed a lot with me. I really loved to sing at the time, and this particular choir director, for some reason, I would, when I was singing, it just never seemed like I could measure up to what she wanted. So she was very critical of my singing. And one particular day, I was in the tenor section, that's the section I used to sing in, and it got to our part of the song to sing, and I was just singing my heart out, really trying to impress her. And she stopped playing the music on her piano, and in front of everybody, she slammed the piano cover down, looked directly at me, and basically yelled and said, "Terrance Lee, I need you to stop singing. Just stop singing right now."
Wow.
Um, and it was not in a nice tone at all. It was in a
Yeah.
very slow tone. Um, some of the other kids that were there in the choir, I could hear them laughing at me
Mhm.
behind me. So I just dropped my head to my chest and I stopped singing for the
Mhm.
rest. After that happened, everything changed. I wasn't the outgoing kid anymore. I wasn't the kid raising my hand in class. I wasn't the kid that wanted to lead any group projects or anything like that. Something in me really changed after that day. And that was at the age of 13. Now, if I fast forward into high school and fast forward into college, and, there would be opportunities for leadership roles, and I would just never do them. I would deny, and I just wouldn't want to do them. I didn't see myself as a leader. And I majored in engineering, got my first role as an engineer out of college, and I essentially was, I like to say, forced into leadership. Uh,
Mhm.
Body put in their 2 week notice, my mentor, and at the time there was a very big presentation coming up, and I was told I would have to give the presentation, which I was not ready for.
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah.
I did it, and it actually went very well. And so, to make a long story short, after doing that presentation, people started telling me they saw leadership potential in me.
Mhm.
I began to start getting more leadership roles and different opportunities in my career. And, I found myself getting my first lead engineer role and then getting a project engineer role, then becoming a proposal manager and, then a program manager. And now today I'm an associate director on a aircraft program. So I say all that to say my journey on high sensitivity, I think really started in that moment.
Mhm.
Something that really shifted in me that day. But I think what I eventually learned to do was to use who I am to my advantage,
Yeah.
and to not let it dominate me or to not view it like it was a bad thing.
Thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable with us because it's through this type of sharing that we can help other people and touch other people's lives as well. And, this is a really great example of, um, how powerful words are and how powerful, you know, somebody's, uh, mean and really unwarranted behavior, especially as a teacher where you're supposed to elevate your children, your students, and you're supposed to be their cheerleaders, and you're supposed to just help them excel, and help them do better. She, in this instance, she did the exact opposite with you and really hindered your progress, not just in singing, but in other aspects of your student, studies and student life. But I think it's so amazing that thankfully, this didn't go on for the rest of your life, that at some point, and there was an instant that the universe brought into your life that changed your life again, and this time reversed what your teacher did when you were 13. And especially being 13, teenage years are so challenging to begin with. And as a highly sensitive person, words and actions impact us a lot deeper than a non-highly sensitive person. Because the reasoning is because two things. One is our depth of processing. So when we when somebody says something to us, we process it at a very deep level. We question every aspect of it, every angle of it. And it's like the depth of processing is very extensive. And then to add to that, we are very we have very deep emotions. So I think the reason that, and I have been in your shoes as well, where something like that really impacted me in a negative way. And it has a lot of people, a lot of my clients have this. As a highly sensitive people, we can unfortunately let other people impact us in such a negative way. But also, as a highly sensitive person, when somebody comes and um, brings out the best in us and shows us our strength, we also hang on to that as well. So it goes both ways.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And I'll even say that when that happened, because at the time when I'm 13, I mean, I didn't know what highly sensitive meant. I didn't
Yeah.
know. Um, I didn't even connect to that event with how it impacted me until I became an adult. I mean,
Yeah.
I really didn't know at the time that that was the reason that I shut down.
Yeah.
I didn't know that that was the reason that I never raised my hand in class anymore. Or even I remember times in college that I would know the answer to things and I would just sit in the seat like I didn't know. I didn't connect all of it to that event, but when I became an adult and I look back on it, I said, "Oh wow, yeah, that was all connected to that moment. Like that was the shift when things changed." But then to your point, I can also think about when people begin to tell me, "Hey, Terrance, I see you as a leader. I
Mhm.
see you as someone that can lead teams. Have you ever thought about that?" So people flipping that and now giving me a different perspective, it helped me to start seeing it differently. And like you said, I think that's definitely something that goes along with being sensitive.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think we touched on my next question, but I'll ask it anyway, just in case you have something to add. My next question is, when did you first realize you're a highly sensitive person? And you mentioned that it was actually, you mentioned that you didn't realize you're a highly sensitive person until you were an adult. But you, looking back, is when you think that was the moment when you realized probably that you're a highly sensitive person and that's why you reacted the way you did. Did I capture that properly?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like in adulthood, and not even that long ago, honestly. Like I would say, as I was writing my first book,
Hmm.
and was writing it and I was retelling the story of the choir incident, it got me to thinking of a lot of other things that have happened throughout my life and the way that the things made me feel,
Hmm.
the way that at certain times maybe I would try to suppress certain emotions because I thought I had to be tough or I thought I had to come off a certain way. So I would hold certain feelings in. I started to think about all those things.
Hmm.
And really was, really, I would say about 3 years ago or so when I first started writing Quiet Voice Fearless Leader. So it's really been a revelation that's come to me in adulthood and something I haven't known about for very long.
Yeah. Me too, by the way. I didn't know until I was an adult, and I had similar experience to you that once I learned about my high sensitivity is when I figured out, oh, these things that happen as when I was a child, that's why I was impacted in this way. So I was able to relate things that happened to me, traumas that happened to me that I didn't even know were traumas until I learned that I'm a highly sensitive person and I started digging and digging and digging. And the more I dug, the more I realized, oh my goodness, I actually had a lot of trauma as a child that I just didn't know until now, and that I'm an adult and I'm processing those things. So the next question I have is, how did the realization that you're a highly sensitive person impact your personal and professional life?
Hmm. I'd say that for me, it was very enlightening and it made a lot of things make sense. It just made a lot make sense. So, in my personal life, I'll say that um, when I used to get emotional about certain things, so one thing with me is that I'm very big on fairness and just people being treated the right way.
Mhm.
And so whenever I see a child that's neglected, or whenever I see someone that doesn't have a home, someone that's homeless, whenever like I see certain situations, from the time I was a kid, it always used to really affect me. Like
Mhm.
certain people, certain friends of mine, maybe, we'd see certain situations and maybe it wouldn't affect them like that. They could just kind of move on to the next thing. Those sort of things always impacted me.
Mhm.
I've always gone out of my way to help people in need. And I don't know that I ever connected it and connected why seeing people in those situations affects me the way that it does. And then professionally, what I'll say is in a very similar vein. Whenever I'm in a situation and I see someone that I feel like is very talented and very qualified, and maybe for some reason they're not being treated fairly, or maybe in meetings they're not being listened to, or they're
Yeah.
not being heard, people are talking over them or interrupting them. Like when I notice those kind of things, that bothers me.
Yeah.
I think for some people, they just see it and they just move on and don't notice it. But I see it and I
Yeah.
notice it. And I try to advocate and stand up for people like that because probably because I am HSP and
Yeah.
because I,
Absolutely.
I can look at them and I can feel them and I can see the hurt or I can see the frustration.
Yeah.
Um, Other people may not see that. So I think personally and professionally, those are some ways that it's really impacted me. And again, it's been like a light bulb went off. It's like, oh, that's why I'm that way. You
Yeah.
know, it helped me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely everything you just explained is aspects of being a highly sensitive person, the empathy part, feeling what other people are feeling, and also um, wanting, we want justice in this world. And it really bothers us when something is unfair and unjust. Um, and we might go through great lengths to advocate for that unfairness or injustice, even if we know at the end of the day we may not win, but we go for it anyway, just because then we feel, okay, I did the best that I could to advocate for this situation, but I'm outnumbered here. But we feel obligated to kind of fight people's battles. And I'm really proud of you for, especially I feel like lately this is happening more and more in corporations where people um, talk over people and people interrupt someone who's speaking. And when you're a highly sensitive person, that really impacts us in a very negative way. So it's nice to have someone advocate for you because often in that situation, we are so distraught that we don't speak up, or if we do, we only mention it once. And if the person doesn't listen, which happened to me a lot, where I would say, hey, I'm still talking, and then the person would continue. And I had someone in the meeting that was just like you, who's also a highly sensitive person, my colleague, and he would just step in and say, hey, Persu is trying to speak here and we need to, give her the floor and not interrupt her so much. And I absolutely love this person. His name is Thomas, and I would just be thanking him so much afterwards because, all humans need to feel heard and understood, but highly sensitive people really need it. I mean, we really get very deep emotions when we don't feel heard or understood or validated. So good job, good for you for advocating for others. And I think that it's really part of being an HSP of like trying to bring justice in this world. Even though we're very logical people and we know there's a lot of injustices that goes on, but we kind of keep on trying, and we're very tenacious people, so we kind of keep trying to bring that justice about. My next question is, how has being a highly sensitive person influenced your career choices?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the industry that I'm in, being in aerospace and defense, and so we're dealing with government contracts, and so the military typically is it's very direct communication. It's very brash, I'll say, in terms of the style of communication for how a lot of meetings go, with our customers and even internally, within our companies. So it's always been interesting to me because the way that I communicate and my style of communication, I think can throw people off sometimes because I'm different in terms of the way that I communicate from a lot of people and my colleagues. So in terms of my career choice, I've actually always been in the aerospace and defense industry since leaving school. I think in the very beginning, it took some getting used to in terms of some of the directness, in terms of the way people would speak. And what I've actually learned is that my best strength is in being who I am.
Yeah.
My best strength is in not having to communicate in a way that someone else does. My best strength is actually in realizing that I'm able to have empathy and see certain things and hear certain things that other people completely miss.
Yeah.
And so, strange way, in a career in an industry where that's kind of more the norm, I feel like I've found a unique space because I'm the one that gets to be different. I'm the one that gets to sit back. And that's kind of become my reputation, honestly, with the people I work with. Like, I'm a little more known as the calm, logical, reasonable leader. Like,
Hmm.
I'm going to listen to the people in the room. I'm not saying I always get it right because I don't. I make mistakes at times. We all do, right? But I'm going to listen to people in the room. I'm going to observe what's going on. I'm going to notice if certain people are feeling a certain way. I'm going to notice if somebody says something that impacted somebody negatively. I'm going to pick up on all of those things. And there's some other people where because their personality is a little more brash, they're just trying to get their words out and they're very just more in your face. They're going to miss all of those things.
Hmm.
I feel like from a career choice standpoint, although my industry is the way it is, I've found a unique space where I'm able to use my sensitivity and observation. So,
Yeah. And that's amazing because you named so many strengths of highly sensitive people, um, that a lot of times highly sensitive people don't embrace it and don't show it because they don't see anyone else like themselves. Because we are only 20% of the population, um, and sometimes maybe you'll have another highly sensitive person in the room, but most likely you won't. And so, because you're outnumbered, a lot of times highly sensitive people hide this beautiful strength that they have, especially in the Western world where high sensitivity is not really looked upon as a strength, and it's looked upon as a weakness. And that's the reason that I got into this a career, is to really show people it is not a weakness. And you just brought so many amazing points up right now. You said that because you see things that other people don't see, you're able to, bring a different perspective um, to the table that the majority of your colleagues won't be able to, because they don't see the subtleties that you see. They don't process things as deeply as you do. And um, you know, they don't take the time. One of the things, depth of processing is not just about processing things deeply, but it's about taking, like, sitting back and observing and noticing what's going on, who's doing what impact are the is the conversation having on the various players in the room. And these things are just all part of being highly sensitive, and it's a huge strength to have. So it's really, I'm really admiring you for embracing your high sensitivity and noticing how amazing your strengths are and how they can help you in your career and in continuing to elevate in your career.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, and like I said, I'm continuing to learn every day. I don't have all the answers, but just continuing. So,
That's awesome. Self-awareness is actually a big strength of highly sensitive people as well. We know what our strengths are, we know what our weaknesses are. We also know which weakness we want to work on and which weakness we just accept as, okay, this is who I am, this is my weakness. I accept it. I know that it's nothing that I can change, or that it's not really worth my time to change that because I have these other things that are more of a priority. So I think self-awareness is a huge key to our success as well.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's see. My next question is, would you please share some challenges you faced in your career due to your sensitivity and how you overcame them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have even a recent example. Well, last year, a program I was working on. So, um, I was leading a program as a program manager, and I will say that the people we were partnered with on the program to execute the contract, their team, their communication style, kind of going back to what I mentioned in terms of a brash communication style and just a way of being, it was completely opposite of me.
Mhm.
Very, in some ways, I'll say just negative
Mhm.
in terms of when something would go wrong, a lot of blaming, a lot of, at times, it just didn't feel like a team, I'll say.
Mhm.
And that was challenging for me. It
Yeah.
was because that's not typically the energy that I try to work with. I try to view things from a team standpoint, and we're all in this together. We're trying to work toward a common goal. And there were some people that their perspective on things, I think, was different. Their communication style was completely different. And so for me, that was difficult. I think in terms of how it worked out, though, is I didn't shift into being the way that they were,
Yeah.
if that
Yeah.
you made a very interesting point earlier where you were saying that HSPs are 20% of the population. And I think that that's very key to bring up because oftentimes what people will do, especially in corporate settings or business, is they'll acquiesce or they will try to act like the people they're around because they want to fit in.
Yeah.
Take on their personalities or they'll take on their way of being, even if it's, negative or if it's against who they are.
Yeah.
Think how I was able to get through that situation was realizing, hey, these people are going to operate the way they're going to operate, right? Like they are who they are. I'm not going to change them, but what I can do is focus on being the best me.
Yeah.
I can focus on doing my best, executing, being who I am, being a light and a positive example for my team. And that's about all I can do.
Yeah.
And in the end, we executed the contract, we delivered to our customer, and everything worked out. I mean, there were some difficult times because of what I talked about as far as communication styles and all of that. But ultimately, I think as long as you're able to be yourself and you're being authentic, then you can hold your head high. So that's the biggest thing that I took away from that experience was regardless of who anyone else is, I need to be me.
Yeah.
And long as I'm doing that, then I'm okay.
Yeah. And for me, I went a step beyond that and said to myself, because I was laid off from my work, from the tech world, along with thousands and thousands of other people. As you know, we haven't had the best economy in the past year, but in the tech world especially. But um, what I realized when I was in my last role is that I was trying so hard to fit in that I forgot that I don't want to fit in. I want to belong. I don't,
Mm,
I want to find my people. I don't want to be like somebody I'm not. I don't want to be like people that I don't actually respect. And
right.
speaking of like people who have this harsh communication style, where I worked, it wasn't even about harsh communication style. It was like I felt like I was in high school all over again. It was about like favoritism and um, you know, you're clicking with this other group and this other person, and I was like, what is happening, and I felt so out of place. And that's when I realized that I need to find my people, even within the organization, not needing to leave to find my people, but I started looking for people where I would feel a sense of belonging, and where not only could I be myself and be authentic, but I could feel that I belong in this company, that I belong in this organization. And it's interesting because it was a small company. So I was able to still, find my people despite the fact that it was a small company. And despite the fact I still had to work with the other people that I felt like I was just fitting in. I wasn't really belonging there. Um, but because my focus was on the people that were in sync with me, I was able to make it work. And I actually ended up loving my job, and I was very disappointed when I lost my job because I felt like, oh, finally, I found my people and now, I'm getting let go. But it was meant to be because I ended up pivoting my career and doing this for a living, which is extremely rewarding. Okay, let's see. The next question I have is, what are some strengths or unique perspectives that being highly sensitive has brought to your work? You already mentioned several of them. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, those are the main ones, definitely. Just the ability to observe and see things.
Mhm.
I think observation just gets overlooked so much because we feel deeply and we think deeply. A lot of times there are things happening in rooms. I mean, I can recall times where I could tell that visibly somebody is upset about something that was said. And it's like everyone else in the room is continuing the conversation as if nothing happened,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of times in those situations, when there's a pause in conversation, I'll say, "Hey, so," I'll say the person's name, and I'll say, "Hey, so that comment, you know, are you in agreement with what was said there, or do you have some thoughts on what was said?" Because I can literally tell that they have, and 99% of the time, they're going to share and they're going to say, well, you know what, Terrance? Yeah, actually, I do have something to say about that. But they might have never said anything had I not prompted, you
Of
know,
course.
position. So it's just things like that. I think as highly sensitive people, we can be a voice for change. We can be a catalyst for change in so many scenarios. I mean, that's just one example from work, but I mean, even in our personal lives, and as we just go through life, as we notice things and we observe things, there's a lot of power, I think, in that, and a lot of strength in that.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. We covered this question, so I'm going to skip it. Okay, this is my favorite question. Many people view sensitivity as a weakness. How do you counter this stereotype in your industry?
Mm. The stereotype of sensitivity as a weakness. Yeah, I think that, like we mentioned earlier, words have a lot of power, right? So a lot of the work that I do in my space, I talk a lot about introversion and extroversion.
Mhm.
So I view sensitivity in a very similar way. I think when people hear the word introvert, it naturally triggers certain thoughts. So
Yes.
people hear introvert, and for many people, it triggers quiet, shy,
Yeah.
passive, weak, things like that. When they hear words like sensitive, it triggers weak or, not lacking confidence or like all of these sort of things when they hear the word sensitive.
Emotional.
Emotional, right? Exactly. And what I love to do, one of my favorite things to do, is to completely counter those definitions.
Hmm.
For example, when somebody says an introvert is quiet, I like to say, well, actually, an introvert is very introspective.
Hmm.
Times you think an introvert is being quiet. Well, actually, my mind is running a million miles a minute, and
That's
I'm thinking about so many thoughts right now. So even though I'm not talking, I'm
right.
thinking about so much. And when I do open my mouth, it's going to probably be something that'll blow you away.
Exactly. And it's meaningful.
And it's
It's not
me.
just, I don't just blurt something out. It's part of being highly sensitive as well, by the way, that you really process things, you think about things, and when you open your mouth to speak,
Yeah.
the words are profound
Yes.
and they have an impact. You don't say things for the sake of sake. You say things for the sake of making an impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the thing. Like, so for introverted, it may be the quiet thing. For sensitive, somebody would say weak or, lacking confidence. And what I would say is that the thing with someone that is highly sensitive is the passion is so high that when we really commit to something that we care about and something that means something to us, we will be all the way committed to it because we care that much.
That's right.
There are some people where they're in something, they kind of want to do it, they kind of feel it, they kind of don't. But for someone that's sensitive, for someone that truly finds a passion in something, like for me, I love to help people. I mean, period. I would if that there was one thing I could do with my career, business, my life, it'd be to help people. Like that's actually why I write books to help people.
Yeah.
So we feel a certain way and we get a passion in us because we're sensitive and because we're empathetic and we care about other people. And like that is powerful.
Yeah.
So people say that, a sensitive person, highly sensitive is weak or any of these things. I just completely counter that.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite thing to do is to take those myths and those misperceptions and completely just flip them in the other direction.
I love that. I love that. We need more people like you because it's important to debunk these myths. Otherwise, they become the truth that because people keep repeating them, and then even highly sensitive people will start believing that, and I work with a lot of people where, they truly believe these things that they're told, and I have to like undo all of that. And that's years and years of someone telling them they're too emotional, they're not strong, they need to toughen up and this and that. And I'm like, no, look at what you've gone through in your life. And look how resilient you've been through it all. And look where you're at now. I mean, amazing. That's not weakness, that's strength, and but I think that more and more of us need to speak up and say, I'm highly sensitive and I'm proud of it, and here's why I'm proud of it. This is my superpower. And I think the more we do that and the more people do that, I'm hoping that we'll be able to change the perception that people have in general not just highly sensitive people, the perception of highly sensitive people of themselves, but the perception of non-highly sensitive people about highly sensitive people, because that really, there are so many people, highly sensitive people that are impacted by these generalizations and by these myths, that if we could debunk them as fast as possible, I think we would be able to, create a much more harmonious and beautiful world.
Absolutely. Completely agree.
The next question that I have for you is, what advice would you give a young, highly sensitive person who is starting their career? And how can they leverage their sensitivity to succeed and thrive?
Yeah, yeah. So for somebody that's starting their career that is highly sensitive, I would say to them the same thing that I say to people that I talk to, people that I coach and work with, is, and it may sound cliche, it may sound like some basic advice, but it's to be authentic and be yourself.
Yep.
We kind of talked about this, a little bit earlier, but the concept, especially someone new coming into a career, that's young, it's you get into this new job, this new role, and you're seeing the people around you, your colleagues, and some of them may not be sensitive, or some of them may view sensitivity as a weakness, or they may have these perceptions and they may say certain things that you disagree with, or their communication style may be very brash and in your face and direct. And sometimes people that are younger in their career, they can be in that scenario and say, well, I guess I need to be more like those people.
Yeah.
I guess I need to shift my energy to be more like that. And I would say to somebody that feels that way, it's actually exactly the opposite. I always encourage people to lean into who you are, to first understand who you are and truly discover that and understand it. And if you're someone that is highly sensitive or has sensitivities, that is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's something you can actually use to your advantage. You are going to be able to feel certain things. You're going to be able to observe and see certain things that other people are just not going to see. And that alone is going to set you apart from most of the people in the room. A lot of people don't realize it, but when I'm in certain meetings, sometimes I'm sitting there and I'm literally just watching the room. I'm reading the room. And people don't know I'm doing it, but I'm sitting there and yeah, I may not be talking at the time, but I'm having a lot of thoughts. I'm reading the room and seeing everything going on. And when I do say something, a lot of it's going to be based on things I observed in that room. So there's just so many advantages to it, and just leaning into yourself, being authentically you, unapologetically, not trying to be like anyone else. I think that's the key.
I love it. I very much agree with that. That's why, as you know, I work with parents of highly sensitive children, and I encourage the parents to change their parenting style, not to try to change their child. And the other thing I encourage them to do is accept their child exactly as they are and never compare them to anybody, not their sibling, not their friends, not, your friends' children, nobody, because they're unique and they have their own gifts. And what you should do as a parent is nurture their gifts. And not that I'm saying that you shouldn't focus on the weaknesses that your child has and help them turn those weaknesses into strengths. But what I'm saying is, it's more important to focus on their strengths and teach them about their strengths so that their vocabulary for who they are, and what if somebody asks you, what are your strengths? Your child doesn't just look at them with a blank face. They know their strengths because it starts as a child. If you start learning about who you are as a child, by the time you are a teenager or a young adult, you will already have that self-confidence that you need to have in order to be your authentic self. Because if you don't have that self-confidence, it's really hard to be your authentic self.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I always tell the parents is teach your children about the difference between fitting in and belonging. And this
Mm.
is, again, very important at a young age because by the time they're a teenager, they're not going to try to fit in. They're going to want to belong.
Right.
But right now, what's happening is that a lot of teenagers are wanting to fit in and do the things that the popular kids are doing or whatever it is, that they need to do to fit in. So I think that it's so important. I agree with you. It's important to be your authentic self and to just, you know, accept yourself exactly how you are and not try to change it to fit in and to be like the others because we're only 20% of the population and the statistic says we're growing a little bit, so they're saying it might be between 20 to 30%, but still, even at 30%, we're a small part of the population. So it's important to know who we are and what the differences are because um, you won't get annoyed or disappointed either because if you think that everybody thinks like you are, like that you thinks the way you do because we're sensitive to other people's feelings and we're careful about how we use our words because we know words are powerful, so we won't be harsh with our words. So when you're little, when you're a child, a lot of my clients come and tell me, well, my child gets so offended when, somebody talks harshly to them. And then my response is, well, have you explained to them that they're a highly sensitive person and that the majority of their classmates are not? And then my clients would go, no, we haven't had that conversation yet. I'm like, bingo, that's what you need to do next is have that conversation. Thank you for sharing that. And then my last question is there a final message that you like to share with our listeners about the beauty and strength of being a highly sensitive person and how that plays in the workforce?
Yeah, I think when you are a highly sensitive person, it's just the ability to feel. And when you have the ability to feel, I really believe you're in a unique position to enact change
Mhm.
because you don't just think about what's best for you. You don't just think about advancing your career. You don't just think about moving up the corporate ladder or getting to the next level. You're thinking about other people,
Yeah,
about relationships with other people. You're thinking about their careers. You're thinking about how can I help this person get to where they're trying to go. You just have a very different perspective. And so um, I'm thankful that I've discovered it about myself. It really has explained a lot because I've been that kind of person my whole life. I didn't understand why.
Mm.
And if you're that kind of person, view it as a good thing. You're not someone that is in your career just going to be doing whatever it takes to get ahead because there are many people that are that way. They're
yeah,
going to just do whatever it takes to get ahead. They're going to step over whoever, they're going to talk over people, they're going to do these things. And if there are people that are that way, let those people be that way. But you be who you are and feel what you're going to feel and realize that being empathetic and being someone that will fight for other people is an amazing thing and it's truly a superpower. So that's what I would leave people with.
I love it. I love it. And I love the fact that this is what we ended and this episode with, because that is so profound and you did such an amazing job communicating that. You know, the words that you use are so powerful. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on this episode with me. It's such an important topic. It's so important to show our listeners that we are resilient, we do well in our careers, and we can thrive in our, in our industry and in our careers. And not only do we thrive, but we do our very best to be the best versions of ourselves every single day. And we understand that, yes, some days I'm not the best version of myself, but I'm still trying. I every day is I'm trying for the best. And that's a beauty that highly sensitive people bring to this world too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, Terrance. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to remind you that you have the power to create a bright and successful future for your highly sensitive child. Embrace their uniqueness, nurture their strengths, and provide them with the love and support they need. Together, we can pave a path to success that aligns with their sensitivity. Thank you for joining us today. And remember, you're not alone on this journey. We'll be here with more insights and inspiration in our next episode. Until then, keep believing in your child's potential because they truly are extraordinary. Stay tuned, stay inspired, and stay committed to setting your child up for success in life. To book a private coaching session with me, please visit my website at parentinghsc.com.